Okay, tutorial day. Today we're going to be going over motion control. I've actually really been kind of dreading and looking forward to doing this one at the same time because there's a lot of information to cover. So this is the point of this tutorial is going to be able to get you up and running with a motion control system and have it connected with Dragonframe and doing what you want. This is not going to be the most in-depth. What we're going to be doing is we're going to connect it to a Dragonframe. We're going to build out the axis. I'm going to explain everything that's going on. We're going to build out the move. And then we're going to show playback and stuff like that. I am also going to be doing another tutorial where we are going to be going much more in depth on just different things that you're going to see on this page in order to really kind of drill into more complicated things. So this is going to be a little bit higher of an overview. So first thing I want to just recommend to go over to dragonframe.com, go over to the support tab and click on motion control. This is going to bring you to their FAQ or their FAQ. I absolutely think they've done an outstanding job with this. There is so much good information in here, but what we're going to be focusing on is not so much as DM16s and 32s, but kits that you can buy. We'll do more of the other stuff later, but a lot of this is still going to apply. So still worth watching even if you're going to be using a DMC 16 or 32. So it says what hardware is compatible with Dragonframe motion control workspace. And there's quite a lot of them. If they go to the DMC 32s and 16s, those are basically step and direction signal generators that will interface with drivers in order to move motors. This is their Dragonframe's own solution. The Arduino DMC Lite is a new version of their DF Moco where you can actually get real-time moves using one of the new Arduino Giga R1s or the Portena H7s. I've done this a couple times with the Giga R1 and it works absolutely fantastic. Then you have DF Moco. This is the original Arduino one. This is only good for stop motion animation and time lapse, but there's still a lot you can do with it as well. As for systems that you could just buy off the market, you have quite a few of them. Motomo, I've got one of their ST4 heads. It's absolutely outstanding. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. I've used mine for probably about 5 or 6, maybe 7 years at this point, and it's always been very reliable. Kessler Crane's got their integration. They've got their Cineshooter Plus. This is an excellent system as well. I've got a couple of these, and I've actually been integrating some of the Kessler equipment in with my own gear to make crazier, more interesting robots. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 axis. The possibilities are pretty limitless with these things. Slide camera, never used it. I suspect it's going to be a very good brand. I've always wanted to use it. Their hardware just looks absolutely exceptional. Then Performing Rigs, I'm really excited to see this one on here. It's a good company. I really like the build quality of what they do, and this is something that will probably be really good for visual engineers who are wanting to do more complex things rather than just doing stop motion or time lapse. Edelkrone, another well-known brand, fairly reputable. I've never actually used it myself. And then we got Noxon, same. Dynamic Perception. As far as my understanding is, Dynamic Perception is no longer in business, so it is going to be a risk using their equipment. You might have to keep an older version of iPhone or Android or something to be able to connect with their NMX digital motion controller. And also, it seems like parts are kind of difficult to find if you need replacement pieces. I've never heard of Smart System. I can't really comment on it. That's brand new to me. Anyway, any of these systems are going to do a wonderful, excellent job. So let's just go ahead and get to it. So this is the ARC motion control page. This is where we're going to be building everything out and building the axis, building the movements and stuff like that, and getting all the motors and stuff configured. The first thing I'm going to recommend is go over and click this little button right here and just make sure you have your live view. And if you don't feel that's big enough, you click it again and it'll give you a bigger version. And this is generally how I run my workspace, with a nice, generous live view. Over here, this is where we're going to start building out the axis, and let's just go ahead and jump in. So this button here is Add Axis, but you could also go in here and click on Add Axis. So we're going to open that. And Axis 1, now traditionally with motion control equipment that you buy off the market, you're going to have Channel 1 will be pan, Channel 2 tilt, Channel 3 slide, Channel 4 and 5 will probably be like a focus or auxiliary. So in this case, I know it's going to be 1, so I'm going to relabel this to pan. and I'm going to keep the function normal, and we're going to go over all this stuff in more detail. Anything I don't cover, don't worry, it's just not terribly important to start out with. We'll do more of it in depth later. So we're just going to want to get up and running at the moment. So I know I'm on channel 1. I know it's going to be camera 1. I don't have to worry about steps per unit or calibration at this point. Maximum jog speed, I'm going to set that to 30,000. Whatever you do, be careful when you're first setting it up not to go too high. Maybe start at like 10,000 or 5,000 and just kind of see how the motor behaves before you really go too far, because depending on the way these systems will be geared, 30,000 for the Kessler system here might not be the same as it is for, like, say, an Axibo. So the acceleration time, this is how quickly you ramp up and ramp down when you're doing the jog. Settle time, this is assignable per axis. So if you have one axis that just has a lot of shake and wobble and every time you use it, you can add a settle time to that axis. And if that axis is used, it will apply a settle time before it'll take the image. Frame to frame speed, this is how fast it bounces from one frame to the next. You generally want to go slower, so 1/8 is pretty good. On position, this one has to do with systems that use encoders, and the only time I've run into a problem where this was needed is when I'm using either Axibo or Kessler, and that's because both of them use encoders on their system. And I'll show you what this does here real quick, because it's worth making note of this because if not, this really might bite you in the butt. So we're just going to go ahead and say OK, and the axis is created. Now, as you can see, I can move, and you see the camera moving back and forth. It's very good. So what I'm going to do, and we'll go cover this a little bit more in a minute, but I'm just going to simply add a keyframe on frame 1. Actually, I don't know why it's on frame 4. Let me get back to 1 real quick. I want to make sure I'm on the very first frame for this. And I'm going to add a keyframe. Now what the keyframe is, basically, it's a motor position in time. The motor position is regarded here as up and down, time, of course, across, the time scale. Every time if I move this out to 5 seconds and I pan the camera and I go ahead and lock in a keyframe there by hitting this button here, then you'll see I have this motion arc. And what it's going to do is it's going to smooth out the movement, so I start from a still, gradually gain speed, and then slow to a crawl to the end. Okay, it's going to be a nice graceful move. As I move this slider back and forth, you see the blue number changing. That's telling me the motor position for frame 109 is 5773. Okay, if I go down to frame 49, it's 13552. So if I want to get my camera or my pan axis to that position on this time scale, I hit this button and you'll see that it moves and lands on it. But did you see what it just did there? And look at the actual position. It wants it to be 1,000 or 13,552,890, but it's not. It's sitting at 13,553. So the reason for this is that the systems with encoders are providing feedback of their actual location and telling Dragonframe where they are. If you're using systems without an encoder, it's more of a trust system, right? You're telling the motor, I want you to move to this position, and it will move to that position, but there's nothing to confirm it. Now, this might sound like a bad thing to not have anything to confirm it, but if you properly load your motors and properly power them and, don't demand more than what they're capable of doing, they will provide incredibly accurate results even without an encoder. And those systems don't report back their actual system's position though. So what does the system think when it's actually not on the right spot? Let's move it out again and let's see if we go back where we land at. Okay. So that was even further off, and it took it a second to get there. So now why this is important is when I first started working with Kessler Crane as well as Axibo with Dragonframe, that was all kind of around the same time. I would get kicked out when I was in a record mode, when I'm actually running a time lapse. The system would boot me out, and it would say a motor failed to reach the proper decision. So after working with Kessler and working with Dami over at Dragonframe, the eventual solution was this. And double click and open this back out. It's on position. So this gives it a range of distance that you can be away from your actual position to where it will not consider it a problem. So if I just say 10, I can be off as many as 10 motor position steps. And I'm not quite sure how that works with Kessler because they don't use stepper motors. They use DC encoded. But it'll behave as if it's a stepper motor. So if it's 10 steps off or under, it's not going to kick me out of the shooting mode. And I've had times where I had to put this to like 15 or 20. But if you watch, we're going to move this again, and we're going to go back and watch what happens right when it hits the position, and then you'll see it pause and shift again. There, then boom. That's enough time to where Dragonframe would kick you out. So the best solution was simply to add that. So if you're using Gazebo, or if you're using Kessler or anything else with encoded motors, you will probably find that you need to put some kind of a buffer on here. So I'm just going to say 10. Next is this is live speeds. So if you're using, most of these systems should be capable of live speeds. If not, it just won't give you that option. But you can see here that it has a max speed of 2,000. I know my max speed on this is probably like about 200,000. Let's see what happens. Yeah, moves pretty quick. But we're going to set with 30,000 for jogging and positioning, and then I'm going to set with 30,000 for live speeds as well. 30,000, and the acceleration, how long it takes to get to max speed. Down here is backlash, rollback, and compensation. We will get into that more later. Generally, you're not going to need to worry about that much. And I can go over a lot of reasons why this is something that's probably never going to cause you any issues. First off, the backlash on most of these systems is small enough it's almost impossible to tell that there is any. But there are times where this might be needed, so we'll go over that. Up here, just a heads up, you got presets. So if you want to use an Edacaron pan system, there you go. If you want to do a Trexo slider, here you go. Not everything has that in there, but basically that'll pre-populate this page with stuff like steps per unit and stuff like that. We'll go over that in here in a second. Index, okay, manual settings. You're only going to be messing with this if you're using a manual rig, and I don't think you probably are. This is exporting information for encoders. I have never actually used this. I'm willing to try to sort it out. It might be something that's really built in there for just like one specific production studio. It's hard to tell. Here's the indexing. This is amazing stuff. With indexing, you can take multiple, or you can shoot multiple time lapse at the same time, or if you're doing stop motion, you can film what you're doing from multiple angles at the same time by bouncing around and doing like 3 or 4 time lapses or captures simultaneously. The system will move it from frame position to frame position and do it. So that actually works fairly well. You can get a little bit too ambitious with it. We're going to cover that in great detail because I actually use this for quite a bit. And it can also be used for prop pullers or moving like little green cards in front and behind of subjects. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this. So we'll go over that in the future. And then you have soft limits. This is if you're going to be using or you don't have limit switches built in. And if you have limit switches built in, you can select the set here, but you're going to need a DMC16 or a DMC32 to make that work. So that was a lot. Let's go ahead, OK. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out the next axis, which is going to be pan. And we're going to go to channel number 2, function normal. We'll show you function when we get over to focus. Then we got steps per unit. I'm not worrying about that now. If you want to see how to calibrate, it's not hard. You hit calibrate. You have the camera or the motor at a 0 position, and with some tape or something, you mark it. And then what you do is you jog that motor until it gets to the position that you're wanting, or to a predetermined position that you have measured. And then you tell it how many. So if it was going to be like 7 inches, you go down 7 inches. Or if it's like 23 centimeters, you would do 23 centimeters, and then that'll calculate it out for your motor, and then that's an easy way to get the calibration done. So that's all we really need for that. Let's beef this up a little bit. 30,000, go 30,000. On position 10, we want that little buffer. I'm happy with everything else. We're gonna go. Ooh, I named that pan. I need to name that tilt. Whoops. Okay. Then let's go ahead and do slide, which is going to be channel 3. We're going to do 30,000, and let's just test that. Is that? Oh yeah, I have to build it and then I have to edit it before I can start moving it. 30,000, we can go better than that. Let's go 75,000. All right, that's good. And then we'll do the same thing for max speed, 75,000. The max speed is there also just so it's like a safety check when you're building your move. If your speed is too, if the movement requires higher speed than what's on this limit, it's going to give you a warning and an error, and you're going to have to go in and correct it. Either slow down the move or up your max speed if that's allowable. On position 10, roll back, backlash compensation, don't need it. Everything else on here looks good. And now let's go ahead and add focus. On this system, I know focus is on channel 5, and I'm going to put the function as focus, and I'll show you what that does here in a minute. Steps per unit, don't need to worry about that yet. Jog speed, let's see how this looks. Well, first we're going to have to create it and then jog it. 10,000 feels good. So do 20 for on position. I could give a little extra on the focus because it's actually really just far less picky. 10,000 on max speed. And let's go ahead and properly name this. Okay, now you'll see I can bounce between the different axes. If I want to rearrange them, I can, and I can rearrange them in any way that I want. Often I will be rearranging these things and bringing up the ones I'm using the most onto the top. But for me, normally that'll be pan, slide, tilt, and then focus, and usually in that order. On this system too, we also have an extra goodie. We've got a second shooter turntable. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to name this to Planet. And this will make sense when we start getting into virtual production. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and name this Planet. 100,000 for max speed. I know that's good. I don't need to back out and redo that to see it. On position, I'm just going to say 100. And the rest of this is good. So, okay, yeah. All right, so going to go ahead and okay. And now I can move Planet, and you see creepy baby moves. Let's dial that back down a bit. We don't need to go that fast. That's just going to be a pain. Now, my apologies if the screen looks like it's changed. It's because it had. I forgot to mention something very important. Once you have all your axes built, be sure to go in here and go to Export, and then Export Arc Axis Setup. And then you give it a name, Dragonframe Tutorial. And wherever you end up putting this, make sure you keep track of where this is at. But for now on, you can always go in when you're setting up a new scene. You can just go in here and go to Import, Arc Axis Setup, find that Arc Axis Setup that you just built and import it, and then it'll bring all the data that you need into these again. Okay, and now we have all of our axes built. So this one actually has a couple keyframes on it. So if you look through these, we have no keyframes programmed on. And that's going to be seen right in here in this window. So go out to Pan, you see it's on there. So what we have here is this is the first keyframe is on keyframe 1, and the next one we put on 150. This 150 is 149 frames up from 1. This is the starting position, this is the ending position, and this is the total distance between them. I'm not exactly sure what this means, and I'm not terribly concerned with it either, or this. Never really had to use it. But like I said, I'm going to be doing something that's going to be a lot more in depth because we're just doing kind of a high level here. Okay. Now let's go ahead and take another look at these each axis and look at the options that we have across this bar. In fact, to do that, to illustrate this, let's go ahead and we're going to add a keyframe onto all axis, and then we are going to slide the camera, pan the camera, and put a little focus on there. Rotate the planet, and then we're going to move out to frame 159 or 150, which is where we were with the pan, right? 150. And I can add keyframes by clicking each one of these through, or I can hit this and it will apply a keyframe to every axis at this location at its current spot. So there we go. Now we have, you see we got more colors, we got more things going on, so this will be easier to demonstrate this. So let's say if pan, let's say we have a really complex move with a lot of stuff going on, and we're trying to see pan through it. We have several ways that we can do this. One, you can click over here and you can go with a custom color, something that maybe stands out a little bit better for you, or something that you like better. The next thing we can do is isolate all the others by clicking this. Or isolate pan by clicking this. So what this does is it drops all of the other axes so you can no longer see them on here. They're still there. They're still valid. They're just not viewable. On the other hand, if I just want pan to go away, I can click on this and it'll make it disappear. Then you also have various bits and things and sliders. I'm not going to get into a lot of this. I mean, some of these things, it just kind of decreases and increases kind of your visual representation of the move. It's not making any modifications to it other than the ratio in which it displays it on the screen. You have ghosts. These are used for little reference lines. We'll go to that later. First, but we're going to spend more time with this. This is, so if you want to pan it left and pan it right, you can. That's how you do it. If you want to go really slow, you can hold this and the panning action is very slow. Or if I want to go a little bit quicker, I can up this little knob here or lever and it moves a little bit quicker. And then there's slide. But when we're looking at these, you see these different arrows. These aren't really the best to go with. So let's go ahead and customize these up because I just totally forgot when I was setting it up. And that's okay. We can always recover. So I'm going to go to pan and I'm going to select a different movement buttons. So we're going to go with that. And let's see. I'm going to move and see if it moves as expected. Nope, that's backwards. So I'm going to swap the motor direction and hit OK. Now this moves the way I want. And the slide, that looks good. Tilt, we're going to want to change this to an up and down. And that seems to work properly. And then we have focus. And that one, we've got a new option. I just noticed this the other day. I thought it was really cool. So we've got 0 to infinity and infinity to 0. So I'm going to do this one because the 0 on the right side to me just feels like it's close, while the infinity on the left, it feels like it's far away. And then I'm going to go ahead and move. Well, let's go ahead and test this and see if this looks right. We're just going to go here where we got some foreground and background. I'm going to push it towards infinity. There, that looks right. And I'm going to bring this back. Okay, perfect. So now we have our proper labelings for our buttons. Well, planet, we got to do planet too. Like that. So we're going to go to this one. Okay. Okay, now moving forward, since we have better buttons on here, as explained earlier, these are where you can press these and attach a new keyframe to your motor position at your current motor position. So if I do a keyframe here, you'll see it just push it down because that's where it's in line with the red line, the reference line. I don't want to add the keyframe there, so I can Control Z that out. These buttons are used to navigate you to the next keyframe on this axis. So if I go over to here, and let's just go ahead and go to the middle point for slide, and I apply a keyframe, okay? If I hit left and right, you see I bounce from the last keyframe, middle keyframe, first keyframe. If I do that on pan, it will take me to the next keyframe, which is the other side. So it'll jump to the end. So this is a way of bouncing through keyframes per individual axis. Here is the buttons that you use to position yourself on that keyframe. So let's take ourselves in the middle, go over a little bit, and here we go. You can do left and right to bounce around back and forth. So I want to position this system to the middle point. I have ways I can go about doing it. I can click these all in a row, or I can click on this and still have to click on them all in a row. I really do wish that they had an option of just resolve all motors to the correct position, but it's okay. And it's also good to be in the habit of doing these one at a time, especially if you're working with probe lenses or other really sensitive types of, or I say awkward or ungainly systems that could potentially run into the set or something. Okay, so everything's at the correct position, and once again, if I want to just see the pan, I click that. If I don't want to see the pan, I click that. So you can sort all that out Next we have the 0. So if you don't have your 0 set up, it's going to have pretty much when you first connected the system, its position when you powered it on, that will be considered 0. So if you want to make you do your own 0, you just have to just aim the camera straight forward, go up to here, and hit set 0. And then if I want to do tilt, let's go down a little bit, and I'm going to set this to 0. And then the slide, same thing. If I put it to a position where I know is the center of the track, I click here and do set 0. So you can 0 everything out, and it's not terribly important just yet, but it's good to know how to do that. When we get into the virtual production and connecting with Unreal Engine, that's going to become very important. But if you're just kind of messing around, you're not using something where you have to log the camera position for later reference or current use, then yeah, you don't really need to worry about that. Same with home. Once you first start it, home will be 0. But if you want to have another home point, which is maybe you want home to be a little bit further back and out of the way of things, to where if you're wanting to move the camera away from the set, you hit home and it puts it up in a position off in the corner so you can work with everything, versus 0, which would align it in the 0 position within the set. Over here on each of these, we got a little menu. We got various things on here: set 0, set home, move to position. We got a lot of stuff that I'm going to be going over a little bit later. The one that we're going to try right now, though, will be focus. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a focus limit on it so I don't end up running into the end of this lens. Okay, so we're going to click on this, and well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move focus until I am at my infinity position. Back just a little bit. All right, my camera is now focused at infinity. I'm going to set this as the upper limit. Oops, I guess in this case that would be the lower limit. Set lower limit, and now I'm going to clear the upper limit. And now if I hit 0 or the close, I can bring this focus all the way back to close focus. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this is it. So then we're going to do set upper limit. Now, if I go out to infinity, it will automatically slow down and not allow me to go too far into where I hit the lens and cause the camera to shift. So generally, this is the only one that I'm going to set hard limits on. It's actually, depending on the equipment, if you have something that could get damaged, but most of this gear, if it runs into the end, it's not going to cause a problem. It's just going to cause the stepper motor to stall. And that's not going to cause any damage. It's just losing grip of the magnetic field. That's all it's doing. Okay, so now we have a basic little move set up, but let's try this again. Let's make this a little bit nicer. So I'm going to select everything, and just so you know, if you want, you can always expand things out or contract them in, or you can grab portions like this and just expand that portion out, or you can grab this and just pull this in. Either way, there's a lot of ways that you can manipulate this. We'll go over this a little bit more here in a second, but let's go ahead and find our first position. So I'm going to slide the camera out. I'm going to pan it a little bit. I'm going to focus. Okay, I feel that's good. And then plan it. Let's have this thing just staring right at us. Creepy baby head. All right, going to lock those in, and now we're going to go out to about 10 seconds. In my case, since I'm doing 30 frames per second, I'm going to go to frame 300. And now I'm going to slide the camera down the other way. I'm going to pan it. That tilt, we're not really going to mess with it, looks. Focus, make sure that's on. That looks good. In fact, let's pan it a little bit more. Get it more in the center. And then we're going to rotate the creepy baby head to stay with the camera. And we're going to go ahead and lock this keyframe in. Now, the one thing that I want to be aware of is since the camera is moving, I need to make sure I do a focus check at some point. And right in the middle of the move on something basic like this is a good place to do it. So we're going to move the playhead there. And in fact, we can just go 150 to make sure we are at the center of the 300 move mark, and hit pan, slide, and plan it. And now I'm going to check focus again because I might need to pull it back. See, it was a little bit too far out. So we're just going to bring this in. Oop, a little bit too far. Right there on the irises. Okay, now I'm going to put the focus lock, and now you see it. It's like basically the focus is starting further out, coming in, and then pushing back out. Now, one thing that you'll see with these, with all these movements here, is we've got these Beziers. These are ways that you can use and manipulate the move and kind of change it. If I want to go with a stronger start and I don't want to be quite as ramped in, I can grab this and pull this back. In fact, I can do that for, oops, redo. In fact, I want to show you something. So let's go to 150 and let's make sure that we're in the right spot for 150. I'm going to put a keyframe on all of these because this is going to help explain some of these buttons a little bit better. As you can see here, I can move these tabs, and I can change and alter the way that these axes behave. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that they are all set up the same, like this. So if I want to pull back this, and I don't want it to be as long of a lead-in, I can just pull this back and move it. Same with this. And kind of tweak these into shape. So I want it to start out a little bit quicker and then eventually slow down to a crawl. But I don't want it to take too long to get going. So we're just going to make that adjustment. Let's go ahead and see how this looks. So assuming you have a real-time capable system, you go over and you hit upload move. And it's going to upload the move. And now you have it. Once it's uploaded, you can press this button in order to play the move. First thing it's going to do is tell you to go ahead and move everything back to the original starting position. And like it says, be careful. Moving motors like that, you don't want to... The problem is it's not going to rewind the move. It will send it directly to that position. So if you're trying to back up around something, you don't want to just do that beeline. You want to be more careful about how you get that back to its place. In fact, I can show you something like that in here in a second. So now it's ready to run move. I'm going to hit start. See, that was a nice lead-in. It wasn't too slow, nor too aggressive. Okay, now, if I want to back up, I can always grab this slider, and it will rerun everything in reverse, okay? So it will trace the movement backwards because you're scrubbing through the movement. You can see I can go back and forth there. Versus sending the motors directly to the position is what they're referring to by beelining the motors, that you don't want it to crash through the set. Let's say you don't want to do this though, you want to do stop motion. That's fine. Go to capture and you can do shoot single frame. You can do shoot 3 frames, 10 frames. Those do it all in a row. You can do shoot multiple frames. You tell it how many. You can do time lapse. Within time lapse, you can tell it what your interval will be. Or if you want to select an interval axis, we'll go over that another time. Or if there's a certain time you want to start or end, or frame limits, and you can go ahead and engage it and it will start doing the move. If you're just going to be doing stop motion though, it's probably going to be shooting single frame each time. So let's take a look at these buttons over here and kind of go over what these are real quick. And you see this one here, this is smooth keyframes, and this one is ease in and ease out of keyframes. Look what happens if I use ease in and ease out. Oops, let me select it. You see what it did? Let's look at the pan, just the pan. The pan will now move and slow and stop, and move and slow and stop. It's creating that into 2 moves. This method will take every keyframe and gradually lead into it until the motor stops and then pick it back up. And that's not something you're probably going to want too much. Personally, I much prefer to use this method, where what it does is it just makes that transition, it just makes sure that you're in the right spot. So if I do a keyframe here, oops, let's go back to 150. If I do a keyframe and move that keyframe, you'll see it moves in and then gradually moves up. So what it does is it tries to take any shifts and changes and makes them smooth. Whereas this one is, all it's going to do is it's going to put a pause on that movement. And that's probably something that you're only going to want on certain times. Let's also look at another one that we can do, and let's go ahead and move these all back. We also have this one here, which is just linear keyframes. Now, if you're watching this, like, let's go ahead and just upload this move and run it, and you're going to see exactly what the angular keyframe. Actually, we're probably not going to see much. Let me do something with this pan here. Let's see. What we're going to see is that the move is going to be very angled when it gets up there. I know I'm looking off into the nothing. But we're going to look is watch the pan, and it's going to move, and at the halfway point, it's going to be very harsh. All right, here we go. Run. And watch how harsh it is when it hits. There's the pan. See that? Yep. Pretty harsh. Probably not the movement that somebody's looking for, but depends on what you're going to do. Often I will use that. Here's a look that generally I tend to do. So I like having a tiny little bit of a lead in, but I don't like having a lot. I feel like it's just kind of wasting time. I like to start engaged. So what I will normally do is either I can grab all these keyframes, and I think pan, that should be on 1. We're going to reposition that keyframe to 1. If I grab this, you see how all those arches change. I can go with a longer lead in or a very short one. I found I can also just select all of these and hit the linear keyframe. But that's often very harsh coming in. So generally I prefer this and then bring that back a little bit. A couple other quick things to go over before we wrap up. If you just want to do a test shot of your of your move, and you just want to see how it's going to go, and you don't want to play it, because like say you're not going to be doing time lapse, right? You don't, because this is a DSLR I have up here, and I never do real time with the DSLR. I'll put like a cinema camera on it or something. But if I'm just playing, if I'm previewing a move, and I don't want to do real time, maybe I can't, maybe the system's not capable of it. You have this run move test, and what this will do is it will take screen grabs as it slowly runs the move, and you can tell it whatever frame rate. So you want to do if you want to do 5 frames per second, you can, or you can just run live speed. If you want to put a delay in between movements, you can. But this is a way where you can go through it and do it without wrapping up a bunch of shutter count on your camera. It'll just snag screen grabs and slowly move it along, and then you can review the footage within here by dragging the slider. So that's also handy to use. Emergency stop if you need to stop it. And another thing to go over real quick, it says ready to capture. This is where you need to be when you're going to start doing shooting in time lapse or stop motion, right? So we're going to click this, and it's going to say you need to go back to the first location, and now it's there, and then say we're going to go ahead and do a time lapse. So capture, time lapse. Let's just do 3 seconds, and it's just going to start running. And this has got a pretty slow start, so we're not going to see that kick in really fast, the movement. But if we go over here, we can actually see the exposures. Oh, that's something funky going on over here. On the last tutorial, we set up 3 exposures, so I'm just going to cancel these exposures out because we're not actually going to be using these. In fact, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to delete those. Boom. Okay, I can't do it with a frame in it, so I'd have to open up a new scene or whatever, but I can at least disable them so I'm no longer taking those images. So now let's do it. Capture, time lapse, 3 seconds. Yes. And you can see each frame filling up. Not only that, if I go over to the animation page, and I can throw this on, and I can just have it in constant loop showing me what is done so far. And I'll normally do that, so if I come into my studio and I got some botanic shots going, I walk in, I'll immediately see what it's doing and how far it's gotten. So that's the high-level motion control. Like I said, we're going to go through a really deep dive with all of this stuff later. Everything that I did not cover, and that's also going to start including things like indexing and attaching different cameras to different things. We're going to have a lot to go over, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up before I just start to meander too long. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was useful, and if you like this stuff, be sure to do that, subscribe and like.